Hello watch enthusiasts! Now today I have a video which I produced a year ago now, and which I'd like to review in a new form which addresses pieces which have been released in the past year. And so I'd like to speak about the best first luxury watches, because where any collection starts is an important place, and certainly when you're looking for a first luxury watch in a collection, you really should be looking at a number of brands which offer you very good quality but also versatile design, bearing in mind that it'll be a watch which you'll likely wear very often. Similarly, it's usually important to have a watch which has a movement which is both interesting in the sense of justifying the fact that it is now a more expensive piece, but also allowing you to have a serviceable movement, but also movement which is reliable. And these are aspects which are so often overlooked, especially where service prices are concerned. Because, for example, you can buy a Jaeger-LeCoultre Reverso for about £2,500, but at £600 a service, that really is quite steep. And so in this video I'd like to speak about 5 watches which give you excellent value for money, very distinctive styling, and movements which offer you interest and accuracy and quality, but also not enormous service charges, which is a real concern. And of course these do come from reputable brands with interesting histories, and a general build quality and design which is both distinctive, but also very, very high quality. Before I begin the video, I would of course like to encourage you to like, share and subscribe if you do enjoy this video and find its content useful. Also, do follow me on Instagram under the address which is now on the screen to be able to access content which otherwise wouldn't be available on the channel, and covers some watches before I release videos about them, to be able to get the first of my content on various subjects, so do follow me there for further information. Also, if you are interested, my Zin 104 and my Seiko Marine Master SBDX 017 are still for sale, so do drop me an email if you're interested in buying them. The Zin is £800, whilst the Seiko Marine Master is £1,800. Now the first watch I'd like to speak about is a little known model from a relatively little known brand, which is the Hanhart Pioneer One. And this is a piece which comes very much from the heritage of Hanhart as a pilot's chronograph maker. And so Hanhart really made their name in the 1930s and 40s, producing pilot's chronographs with monopusher movements, which were on all counts very, very good quality, and continued to be used even in some films through the 1960s and 70s. And nowadays they're still the same brand, but they produce quite an interesting range of chronographs and also some three-hand models. And this piece is their entry-level piece, which represents a simple pilot's watch, which is a three-hand model with the date and a rotating bezel. But it has a wonderful and very charming design, extremely high quality, and modern proportions, which make it a wonderful option if you want to go for something which is a more accessible luxury watch, certainly, but I think still deserves that title for its quality and also its design. With a very modern diameter of 42mm and a thickness which is relatively modest of 12mm, the watch is made of brushed stainless steel with some polished elements such as that large crown. One also has a 100-metre water resistance despite not having a screw-down crown, which means the watch is perfectly suitable for swimming. And on the top of that you see this rotating bezel which has this interesting knurling to it, which is very much of the 1930s, with this red section at the top to allow you to be able to time periods, which is very helpful for general daily use, but still doesn't give you a very bold graduated bezel, so it gives you a nice best of both worlds scenario. On the front one sees a domed sapphire crystal which gives you an attractive vintage feel, but also the high scratch resistance which really is needed for daily wear to be able to wear the watch confidently without concern of scratches. But also one has a dial which comes in 4 different variants, with the black and white versions being perhaps the most classically correct, with a blue version and a grey version, quite interestingly, also available if you want something more quirky. And these have a great deal of different textures to them, with a raised centre and raised edge with graduations, as well as a sunken section for the luminous hours, which are printed but with a very thick loom to the dial, which allows them to take on a 3-dimensional form. Also the whole dial is textured, which is an attractive element, and the date is in black at 3 o'clock. The hands and the details on the dial do come with red accents depending upon the version, and are luminous of course too, which allows you to use the watch in the dark, but without losing those pencil hands, which are very elegant. The movement inside the watch is a predictable option, which is the Sleater SW200, but is an excellent automatic movement and really the ideal option for a watch of this price, because it offers you a Swiss-made movement whilst the rest of the watch is, and I emphasise this, made in Germany, and by hand at that, and it runs at 4 Hz, giving you a very smooth run to the second hand, and it has a 38-hour power reserve with automatic winding as well. So you get a very competent movement of very high quality, which, when prepared properly into the standards this brand operates, is a very respectable movement, and also one which will continue to provide very good service for years to come. The watch is available on a variety of different leather straps depending upon the version, and the price is £875, which I think is a very, very good deal for a watch which is a fantastic everyday model, for everyday functions, whether it's swimming in the pool or use at the office. The second watch I'd like to speak about is a model which represents a more dressy interpretation of an entry-level or a first luxury watch. Because this piece is the Junghans Meister driver Handaufzug. Now, I apologise for my German pronunciation, but this is the hand-wound version of the Meister driver. And Junghans is a brand with a lot of very interesting pieces, and certainly their Max Bill collection and models do get a great deal of publicity. But I feel this is an interesting model because it represents a piece which gives you an extremely slim case, a very interesting movement, and a similarly interesting dial to give you a certain everyday practicality and a certain everyday look to a watch, which otherwise is very dressy, so for someone who wants something more formal, but with a twist. To begin with the more dressy characteristics of this watch, the case is in stainless steel and is fully polished, with an exhibition caseback displaying the movement. And the watch itself is small too, at 37.7mm in diameter by 7.3mm thick, making it extremely slender, despite the fact that it has a very large and very heavily raised, scratch-resistant coated double-domed plexiglass crystal. And so this gives you the soft warmth of a mid-century dress watch, but with some of the scratch resistance of a more modern crystal, which I think is a very attractive balance. The fact that the case is fully polished also adds to this, and it has a nice small crown, but still with a nice grip, allowing you to wind up the manually wound movement inside this piece. Because inside this watch, which is only water resistant to 3 atmospheres, you have the caliber J815.1, which is a manually wound movement with a 42-hour power reserve running at 3 Hz, with of course the small seconds on the dial. Now the movement this watch is based on is not the usual suspect being the ETA 2801. Instead this is the ETA Pissus 7001, and this is the same movement in fact as the Nomos Alpha, although the Nomos Alpha is produced by Nomos themselves, whereas this is the original design. And this movement is striped rather beautifully and given blued screws as well, and this really is a respectable movement in terms of its quality, but also in terms of its beauty looking at the back of the watch, because it gives you a movement which really was originally designed to be manually wound, and with a very beautiful arrangement of bridges and a very attractive view of the balance. And so this movement is a 17 jewel movement too, and provides you really with everything you might need in terms of a manually wound caliber. But it's when you come to the dial of this watch that you see a very different interpretation of an automotive designed watch, because there are 2 dials available, and both have a style of varnish on them. One is primarily anthracite, the other one has this sand colour. And so one sees one version with this sand-coloured centre to the dial, and this anthracite run around the edge with these luminous markings showing the minutes, whilst the hours are on the small run around the edge, whilst one also has a version with larger hours, which is perhaps the more dressy alternative. But both versions allow you to have a luminous dial, with luminous hands as well, so you get a certain practicality of a daily wear, so you can enjoy this luxury watch every day, but also you get the dressiness, really, of the shape of this watch, and the distinctly vintage style to its dial. And so I think that if you're looking for a more dress-orientated watch for a first luxury piece, this is a wonderful way of entering that price segment, but also that level of quality which is expected of a historical brand like Junghans, and certainly they have been able to provide really wonderful watches over the years, and I think at the moment they're producing a very interesting collection. And so for the price of £1,120, I think this is a very good deal, and a very good option. In the low thousands, there's a great deal of competition for the best chronograph, and certainly as far as an entry-level watch goes, with an emphasis on practicality, on daily use, and daily enjoyment, I can certainly see a great deal of options available on the market, and these options involve pieces like, for example, the Longines Avigation Big Eye, with its rather fantastic play on the Veggery 7750, which is produced bespoke by ETA for them, using a column wheel. However, a piece which I think offers perhaps a little bit more daily use and functionality is the rather interesting model, the Hamilton American Classic Intra-Matic Chrono. And this piece is based on mid-century chronographs by Hamilton, albeit grown from 36mm to a more modern 40. And with dimensions which are more modest of 40mm by 49.2mm from lug to lug, and 14.45mm thick, this is an interesting piece with a 100-metre water resistance, and a general practicality which can be used every day, with a very interesting design and very interesting movement. Looking beneath the double-domed sapphire crystal on this watch, one sees a dial which is very much inspired by those mid-century Hamiltons. And in the current range there are 2 dial options, one silver and black panda-style dial with a tachymeter around the edge, as well as a blue version with a main dial in blue and some beige aged lume colour style sub-dials. And one does have lume on all of these dials, with lume in the hands and also on those applied indices, but the general design is very conservative, with this horizontal layout of the 2 sub-dials, with the running seconds on the left and the chronograph minutes on the right, and the date placed at 6. And the dial design, I think, is excellent, with a very great deal of attention to detail to produce a very historically accurate dial, but also an attractive one in terms of still being appealing in a modern age. Then one has the fact that this case is relatively simple in its forms, but very well executed in fully polished steel, with these narrow lugs, as well as these narrow styles of pushers, as well as a crown which pokes out from the side of the case, and is signed with the old Hamilton logo, which also adorns the dial. Now inside this watch one finds a movement which is unique to Hamilton, and it's called the H31. The movement is based on the Veltri 7753, hence that layout of the subdials, but represents a more practical option than simply adding a column wheel. So in this case they've kept the cam system of the normal Veltri movement, in the sense that it's a more serviceable and also a generally very reliable setup, but they've added 2 jewels to this watch, making it a 27 jewel movement, and through various changes such as improving the gear train, also giving it a single piece rotor, improving the mainspring, and also refining the regulation, they've been able to give it a 60-hour power reserve rather than 42 hours and much higher accuracy. So you're able to have a watch which is more useful and more practical on a daily basis than a more refined chronograph movement, and of course being automatic you also get that additional practicality of not having to wind the watch every morning, making this watch a very interesting balance of new and old. And aside from that, I think the design is simply fantastic on this watch, on the leather strap, whether you go for the blue or the silver version, because it does capture that mid-century American style to Hamilton watches, which is very much a no-nonsense product, but a very high-quality one too. Also, if you're someone who enjoys racing watches, there is an air of that period where racing was concerned, with those sunken subdials with a concentric pattern on them, and the slight sunburst effect to the dial which catches the light and really does look like something from that period, with of course the fact that these watches are now Swiss made, and the fact they are Swatch Group movements and Swatch Group watches from the Swatch Group being the owner of Hamilton, you do also get a certain serviceability which is fantastic, and you know that this watch will be easy to maintain and not too expensive either. And so the price for this watch is £1,930. Now the penultimate piece I'd like to speak about is a model from Baume Mercier, a brand which for many years hasn't been respected a great deal because of the fact that they produced a lot of rather unremarkable pieces. However, in recent years they've really updated their brand and their range, and given us this, which is the Clifton Baumatic. And it's an automatic in-house watch with a very interesting 5-day power reserve automatic movement with full decoration and a chronometer certification for certain versions. And with this watch they present a very, very high quality piece with a very interesting design, impressive specifications, and also a great deal of care to produce something new and something innovative, and I think that suits this concept of a first luxury piece very, very well, as the modern sort of alternative to what the Rolex Datejust used to be, as a slightly more accessible piece, but a watch which you can wear every day and enjoy with a great deal of functionality. With a 50-metre water resistance, this 40mm by 10.3mm thick watch is designed to be more of a daily wear dress watch than anything else as a sports watch. However, that suits this watch extremely well, because the watch is available either in stainless steel or in stainless steel with some golden elements on the bezel, the crown, and the dial fixtures and hands, or of course there is a solid gold version, but that's not really addressed in this video because it has a different case design, so really it's not involved. But the case design of this watch is very modern, with these very large polished bevels running down the lugs, and the lugs themselves are quite delicate, but the fact that the watch is 40mm means that it's a very wearable size, whilst you do have that slight flare to the case, which allows the watch to take on a very distinctive shape and form, but also gives the watch a very sedate, but also in many ways a very sober design, which I think suits it very well. The dials on these watches are also rather beautiful, underneath a domed sapphire crystal. And the dials on these watches vary quite significantly between versions, but really there are 2 main categories of these watches which define their price to a certain degree, because one has the chronometer versions and the non-chronometer versions. And these are distinguished by the text chronometer on the dial, of course, but also the crosshairs are only seen on the chronometer versions. And one sees a white dial version, which is very glossy, as well as the golden version with those golden elements in that two-tone form, which is also the white dial. Then one also has a black dial available, and my personal favourite, a fumé blue dial, where one has a very strong blue in the centre of the dial fade into a black around the edge, but with a glossy style to the surface of the dial, as well as these very, very distinctive markings on the dial, and the date placed at 3 with these graduations running around the edge of the dial, but with the individual hashes for the seconds being pushed inwards, it makes the dial appear larger than it is, but also gives it some sort of scientific feel, which I think is wonderful and really does capture the spirit of this watch as a far more technical piece than has previously been seen from Baume Mercier. Also, one has a signed crown, which is of very high quality, and a general design on the strap or the bracelet, which works very, very well. If you turn the watch over, you see the movement, which is the in-house caliber BM13. What's immediately apparent with this movement is that it's extremely well decorated, with a style of perlage all over, in addition to a custom rotor, and of course a design which is bespoke for Baume Mercier because it is an in-house movement. Also, it runs at 4 Hz, giving you a nice smooth run to the seconds, and whether you go for the chronometer or non-chronometer versions, it's going to run very, very well, and is going to run accurately. Now, this is in fact a second generation movement, because in the original version of this watch, which went for sale about a year and a half ago now, it had the BM12. And this version is a refined model, so it has a newer lubricant, as well as a resized mainspring to ensure that 5-day power reserve is correct and works properly. Also, it has a silicon escapement in this version, but does lose the silicon balance spring used in the previous version in favour of adopting a chrome core surround to the movement, which allows the anti-magnetism to actually be higher than the original 1500 Gauss of the first version. So one can assume this watch is about twice as anti-magnetic as a Rolex Milgauss, despite having an exhibition caseback, which is rather brilliant for this price. And so I think the fact that this watch is of this quality and of this detail with a very distinctive design and a very clever movement means the fact that it undercuts Tudor's prices for an equivalent or similar sort of watch, I think this watch is a very interesting proposition and something a bit different to consider. Now, the final watch I'd like to speak about is a watch which is perhaps not placed in the chronological place which you would expect, being potentially less expensive than the watch before it, depending upon the options you go for with either. However, because this watch stands aside from so many of the other designs in this video, and is so different to the other options, I thought it really should stand alone. Because this is a watch which I think represents the ideal, more affordable but still extremely good value dive watch, which gives you everything you might want, whether you're going on a diving excursion to some exotic location, or simply using it at home. Because this is the Oris Aquis GMT date, a stainless steel watch which is 43.5mm in diameter, and gives you a beautiful array of brushed and polished finishes, with a design which is distinctly Oris in its form, which you really couldn't mistake for anything else. And I think the design of this watch is excellent in terms of giving you a very ergonomic use, but also an air of quality which you wouldn't expect. With its sharper elements and very distinctive form, this is a form and design of case which has been used in the Oris catalogue for a few years now, but has been refined to a very impressive level with this piece. And so this watch presents you with a 300-metre water-resistant diver, with the first bezel from Oris to feature a full 24-hour GMT setup. And so the way this watch works is to allow you to have a GMT function which is more integrated into the dial through that rather attractive concentric ringed area running around the inside of the indices and through the date, with that smaller hand for the GMT function. But also with the use of that external bezel, you can track 3 time zones at once, which is something you wouldn't normally get on a dive watch with that GMT function. Of course, while speaking about the dial, one has this beautiful sunburst effect to most of it, with these fantastic applied markers which echo the hands in their form, and are all fitted with BGW9 lume to be able to see this watch in the dark, as is the bezel. And the dial of this watch is protected by a very subtly domed sapphire crystal, with internal anti-reflective coating, and of course being double domed, there's almost no distortion from this crystal, which is especially important underwater, where you would receive this sort of trouble from a flat crystal with the distortion and the mirroring that often causes. Also, the bezel on this watch is ceramic, so it's very unlikely to be scratched and would take a very, very strong impact to damage. Naturally, you get a screw-down crown on this watch, and the movement inside this watch, which is protected by this waterproofing, is the Oris 798, which is an Oris version of the Sellita SW330-1, which is an automatic winding Swiss-made movement with 42 hours of power reserve running at 4 Hz to give you a very smooth run to the seconds, and an instant date change, which is very helpful to give you that instantaneous change between one date and another at midnight. Also, you do have that GMT function built into it, and whilst this isn't a traditional GMT in the sense that you adjust the GMT hand independently rather than adjusting the hour hand independently, it does give you a certain flexibility to use this watch like any other watch during daily wear. And admittedly, with straps, you are somewhat limited with these pieces, because you can only use Oris straps, or you can have a strap custom made, but because they have very narrow bars on these watches, you can't fit a normal strap. However, the quality of the Oris straps is so high that I wouldn't call this a downside, because the rubber straps are excellent, and also nowadays they do offer leather straps for these pieces, as well as the metal bracelet, which is very well finished and works extremely well. And so I think for a dive watch in this sort of entry-level luxury category, this is a fantastic and versatile option. And so the price is between 2,300 and 2,500 euros. And so I'll conclude this video here, but do tell me in the comments down below what you thought of this video, and whether you enjoyed it, or whether you would have chosen other watches for it. And if you enjoyed this video, then do please like, share and subscribe to help the channel, and also to be able to see more videos and content here in the future. So thank you very much for watching. This is Arm on the Watch Guy, out.